thinking back, it's just like something from the movie. I mean, they were trying to kidnap one of us. So we moved in the middle of the night. One by one, they would take us from the 5th floor of the apartments. Old Soviet apartments with no lights.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide and we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. This is episode 128, Vladimir, a refugee's trek to Christ. My wife and I, we were sitting on the back deck after dinner, and I was checking my phone, and I get a notification, a Facebook friend request from somebody named Vladimir. And I'm going, from Russia? And I checked Ukraine. No, he used to be in Ukraine. Used to be. Now he's here. Looks like he's got his own media company. And the more I look into Vladimir, it gets more interesting and more interesting and more interesting about how he got here. And this seems to be not just a journey from Ukraine to the U.S., but it's a faith journey too. I got to talk to this guy. There's a story here, and I'm reminded of just how easy it's been for me, and maybe for you. You know, born in a Christian nation, to a Christian family, a nation where you can worship however you want to. I don't have to learn another language. English does just fine, pretty much in the world now, and it's like pretty simple, really. And then there's Vladimir. You know, he's coming from a country where they push atheism, but Dad finds Christianity. Mom doesn't want any part of it. She's an atheist, until a series of touched by heaven moments kind of wake up Mom. It's a story of escaping Christian persecution for Vladimir and his brother, escaping the Mafia. There's espionage in this story, too. It's all of a sudden we turn into a movie, espionage of escaping. It's a story of a very poor family, 9 kids. How'd you like to share a toothbrush? Yeah, that kind of poor. And then getting over here and everybody having to learn English. And how is it Vladimir sounds like he's from Nebraska? How did he do that? You know, normally with these episodes, we kind of take a moment or two, right? And we kind of surround everything around it. In this case, we skim. That's what it feels like. We skim with Vladimir through family life and his life, and we see the hand. The whole thing is a touched by heaven moment because we see the hand of God through all of it, guiding this family to this country, guiding, protecting, helping everyone find God within it and prosper by it and be successful. And even as Vladimir is starting to walk away from God, what does God do? Well, He touches them and brings them back in close. It's a remarkable story of Vladimir. So let's start skimming here at Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God.
Making a FaceTime audio call to Vladimir Proknevsky.
Trapper Jack.
I'm not trying the last name. I'm not doing it.
Yeah. In my country, it's Proknevsky. You know, in America, it's Proknevsky. In Vladimir, in my country, is Vladimir. But I grew up in East Tennessee, and they would call me Vladimir. So it's a little different down there.
How old were you when you moved over?
I was 12 years old, and Trapper, we moved to the United States. It was bizarre. We moved, so we had Mafia threats because we sold our apartment, and like 2 weeks before we moved to the United States, a girl knocked on our door, and she knew our family, and she overheard a conversation of local mobsters against Mafia, and they were trying to kidnap one of us because they knew that we had some money because we sold the apartment. So we moved in the middle of the night, like at 3 o'clock in the morning. We couldn't tell anyone. We hired a bus with some bodyguards. One by one, they would take us from the 5th floor of the apartments, old Soviet apartments with no lights. It was something now thinking back, it's just like something from the movie. I mean,
yeah, Cold War. They were going to hold you for ransom?
Yeah, that's what they were trying to get, just to kidnap for ransom. And so we moved to the United States.
How'd you get the okay to come over?
We moved here as refugees. So because my dad was an underground pastor in Kiev, Ukraine, he was persecuted by the KGB. After the fall, after when the government went away, we had nothing. We had no education. It got to the point to where we had to take turns to go outside to play because we only had so many pairs of shoes. We had to share toothbrushes growing up. We pretty much grew up on like rice and potatoes, which I often jokingly say that we were vegetarians and didn't even know it. But that was the norm. I didn't know we were poor until we moved to the United States, and then I was like, oh, okay. So,
my gosh. So because he was a pastor, persecuted pastor, that was kind of the road over?
My father was able to apply to move to the United States as a refugee, so he was able to prove that he was a believer who was persecuted. He had all the papers, he was written up. And anyway, at one point they threatened to send him to work on the reactor at Chernobyl, which would have been a death sentence, I guess.
After or before the issues?
During, they wanted him to be one of the first responders to go there and work on the reactor. So they threatened him. And but God protected us. It's amazing how God was protecting even the church. Like during those times, I heard stories all the time how Christians weren't able just to phone each other and say, "Hey, we're going to meet at this place for church." That everything had to be in secret, and so people would have dreams and visions at night and where to go for church, and just stories like that. Yeah, and it's amazing when the church is persecuted, when people surrender 100% to God, when the church's back is against the wall, so to speak, and they have to surrender. That's when beautiful things happen. That's why a lot of times you see a lot more miracles and things like that in places like that, because we're light, and when you're in pure darkness, light shines brighter. Right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I view it. Because years later, I remember thinking about just processing everything. It's like, why were we persecuted? I mean, Christians are loving, kind people. You squeeze a Christian, love comes out, right?
Should.
And
yeah.
Yeah, it should. We're the light. It's like, why would the government be so threatened by us? But then it dawned on me, is just like, well, we are light, and devil in his kingdom is darkness, and light exposes darkness, and they don't like the light, and so they try to put it out.
True.
Yeah.
And we're a target. Church is a target. Believers are a target.
Mainstream media pretty much made the Christians look like they were pedophiles. The reason why they have such large families because they were pedophiles, and so there's just a lot of I guess false information that they were spreading around the country about the Christians, who they are, what they do, and so.
How many initially came over of the 11 kids?
All of it, all 9.
It's 9 kids, rather.
It was a scary situation. I'll never forget it. When we were in a bus going to the airport, I was looking through the streets where I grew up. It was so quiet, and it was just kind of that moment where time stopped, and I'm just kind of looking at it all and thinking, I will probably never come back. This is probably the last time I'll ever see this place. And 20 years later, I haven't been back.
And you flew from what city to what city?
We started in Kiev, Ukraine, and then we flew to Vienna. And then from Vienna to New York City. And I remember just culture shock, just going to New York City. And then, yeah.
I cannot imagine.
Just so much going through your mind, different culture. But it was awesome. I'll never forget the first time I went to Walmart. It was just like, whoa, what is this? Or like all you can eat place. I remember they were like, eat whatever you want. I'm like, this is a trick. It's a trap. You guys, don't fall for it. There's no such thing as eat whatever you want, as much as you want. But anyway, yeah, we gained some weight and then we had to lose it.
When you guys first came to the U.S., what was stop number 1 for you? Where'd you settle in?
It was this town, Kingsport, Tennessee, where we learned English, where they called me Vladimir. Vladimir, you ain't from around here.
Why Tennessee?
We had a family. I think my aunt was living in Virginia side, but it was on the border of Tennessee. And
she was already here?
Yeah, and there was a Bridge Refugee, the organization that she was connected with, that were located there as well. And they found 2 sponsors in Tennessee. There were 2 different churches in the small town of Kingsport, and so they sponsored our move. I was very impressed that 2 different denominations came together, put away their differences, and every day they came and they brought us food to eat. They took us shopping. They took us on their vacations. They taught us English, and I just remember thinking, these people, like, there's no, like, they probably want something from us. Like, we're probably going to have to pay it all back, and then 20 years later, nobody's asking for anything. And I just remember that no strings attached, true unconditional love, how much it affected us and impacted our family.
So how did you drop your accent so quickly, though? I mean, even from age 12. How old are you now?
I am 33, I think. Yes, yeah. I'm 33. I had to think about that.
You don't sound like you're from Tennessee either.
But when I moved to the United States, I remember when we were 12 years old, we were going through Walmart, and I was just so embarrassed because I couldn't understand the clerk. And I remember I promised myself that whatever it takes, I'm going to learn this language, and I'm going to get rid of the accent. And so the first thing that came to mind was working in the restaurant business as a waiter. I was like, that would be a great job to have. I'm forced to kind of talk to people all day long. And that's kind of how I or I guess I learned English faster that way because I was forced to speak to strangers 24.
But as you
all day
know,
long,
there's all kinds of different English here in this country. You got there's Southern and there's Northern and there's I'm in the Great Lakes area. There's a Great Lakes, there's a little twang up here too, a little bit of an edge that's a little different than say someone from Nebraska or California.
Right.
So, but you sound like you could be from the Midwest. You seem to have nothing.
I did go to Ohio State, and I lived in Columbus for 9 years.
That's it. That's where you got it then. Something happened there, man.
I'm a Buckeye. A combination of Buckeye and Tennessee and just Ukraine and a whole lot of other things. 614. But let me tell you, Trapper, your podcast has been so awesome. I discovered it not that long ago. And it was just, it's like when you go to a big church, you just feel like a number. It feels so sterile in a way. It doesn't feel the same. But like when you go to a small group, it's a little different. And listening to your podcast, it was just like I felt like I was just hanging out with two awesome people, and we're having like a small group discussion. And what I love the most about it is how I learned, or I guess it's something I've always known, because my mom is a big prayer warrior, but the power of prayer, it seems like more I listen to your shows, the more I'm like, wow, you forget how powerful prayer really is.
I just love the visual, that we move the hand of God. So, yeah.
I'll tell you a story about prayer real quick. My mom, she was an atheist growing up, and she said she'll never become a Christian ever until this is a bizarre story. My dad was just starting to become a Christian, and he was already on fire pretty much. And my mom's like, I'm not going to do it. Christians are crazies. Watch, no way, over my dead body. And then her friend, she was friends with a lady who was an actress, and she had a vodka making machine at her house, and she was going away somewhere, and she dropped it off at her house, and she said, listen, can I just hide it at your place because I can't take it with me? It was legal. And so my mom took it in, and she said every night at 3 o'clock in the morning, there were spirits coming out of that thing. And they were like floating through the air, and they looked like cartoon characters, like mermaids and stuff. And they would get really close to her, and they would show their teeth. After that, she realized that there is darkness, and anyway. So because of that experience, she pretty much ran to church, because after prayers, all that stuff went away. And it's interesting, power of prayer. My mom. So growing up, we had a family of 9 kids. Everyone always said, in a culture where 2 or 3 was like the norm, and a dog, having 9 kids was abnormal. And so we were very poor, and nurses, doctors, neighbors, coworkers, even relatives were harsh on Mom. They would say things like, what are you doing bringing such a large family into this world? You can't provide for them, so chances are they'll grow up to be criminals. They'll kill, steal, destroy. And, no parent wants to hear that. But my mom, she would take her hands and she would put her hands on her belly with each pregnancy, and she would speak the opposite. She would say things like, my kids will serve the Lord. Everything they touch will prosper, and they'll be the head, not the tail. And she would speak life over us. And it's kind of emotional thinking about it now. But, so many years later now, over 20 years now, everyone is in the United States. Everyone is serving the Lord. Everyone is healthy. Everyone's doing well. And so the power of prayer is so powerful.
And your mom, what a flip from I'm not doing that Christian craziness to praying over each kid and going, no, you're going to be just fine. Wow. Was it all from a vodka machine?
Well, it was one event like that. And then there was another event where my brother should have been dead. He was run over by a car, and God kind of like protected him, and we had no scars, no nothing. And she was just like, what is going on? Kind of like we're listening to her podcast, all the stories you share. She had, it's pretty much all your guests combined kind of thing. She had those things happening so frequently, and it finally got her attention. They're like, wow, okay, there's something to that. And, to this day, my mom, 7 o'clock is her prayer time. We don't call between 7 and 8. It's usually called like 6:30 to put in a prayer request. But her prayers are just amazing. I mean, one time I remember I was flying back from a business trip, and I remember I spoke negatively. Just didn't say good things. There wasn't anything super horrible, but I criticized somebody who was a person of faith. And I didn't feel good about it immediately. I just felt, why did I say that? And I said it to somebody else who I respected And I immediately regret it. And when I landed, my mom phoned me. She called me, and she told me, she's like, as I was praying, and the Lord told me that you were speaking terribly of somebody, or didn't say good things. And I was like, wow, Mom, you have a connection with the Lord that I don't.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
So
amazing.
anyway.
What a connection. Well, I saw that you even worked in the Billy Graham ministry for a while. That's awesome.
Yeah, I worked, and that was a kind of bizarre thing. My twin brother moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina to work for Fox, and it was his dream job. When your twin brother moves somewhere, we're so close. We shared a room, and a complicated last name. And so I was like, man, I got to go visit my brother. And so when I I went down to Charlotte to visit, I went through the Billy Graham Museum, or the library there, and just blown away by how much this one man accomplished in his one life. And at the end, I was just like, hey, you know what? I should probably see if they're applying. And just randomly applied for a job, and overnight, almost, they pretty much flew me in for an interview. This was a God thing. It was awesome.
Were you aware of Billy Graham at all at that point?
I was. My dad volunteered at the Crusades in Moscow. So
I was going to say, Billy Graham, that was a big deal, and there was a lot of controversy whether or not he should go, where he was being used as a tool of the Soviet Union and all this stuff, but...
he was a big deal. Yeah, my father and my brother, I think his youth volunteered in Moscow.
Billy, it's funny, even when I was out of the church, if he was on television, I watched him. Him. He had something. I knew he had something. And he changed a lot of lives.
And I got to see Billy Graham cross the finish line, so to speak. With I made a website for his memorial website, and my last week there was when he passed away. It was like just God arranged it that way.
Wow.
I put him a 2 weeks notice, and then I extended it again. When I extended, he happened to pass away during that last week. And so I got to see all the presidents come in and the whole 9 yards.
Well, what a story you have! My gosh, your email just blew me away. I mean, are you fearless or what?
No, I'm one of those people that I'll do it and then I'll think about it.
After the fact.
Yeah,
After
me and my brother. I don't know if I have an identical twin brother. I mean, if you met one, you met the other. It's a copy paste kind of experience. And we both 2 years ago, we both quit our jobs cold turkey. We both have 2 kids each. We're married and with zero, pretty much savings, not much. Everything. We just quit cold turkey to start a company of our own from our house.
You're crazy.
And one Adobe tweet put us on the map. And because of Adobe, we started selling courses and products and scripts. And that's kind of how we make our living.
Gee, that's phenomenal. You mentioned in one of your emails a dream you had, which was really interesting. You want to go through that one?
Yeah, that dream was bizarre. I've never had anything like it. It was more real than this. This was in 2015.
And where are you in your faith journey at this point?
I moved to Columbus in 2009, and I turned to the Lord at about 2009-ish.
Okay.
I am in my house, and so sure enough, I see shadows approaching. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Jesus. It's awesome. So the door opens up, and my older brother, he goes, oh, okay, everyone, say bye to Jesus. And I'm like, what do you mean bye to Jesus? He's not coming in? He's like, no, he's not coming in. I'm like, oh, no. I didn't wait all this time and just, not meet Jesus, the King of Kings. And so I look outside, and deep, like far, far away in the distance, I see this man in the white robe just kind of walking on the edge of the forest. And he's about to take a left turn and disappear, like go in the woods and not be seen. And I'm like, oh, no, this isn't happening. So I wasn't like on a dead sprint trying to get to him. And at this point, I'm screaming his name, Jesus, trying to get his attention. I look, and there he is standing there, just kind of all puzzled, look at me. And I'm breathing hard at that point. And he's just looking at me like, what do you want, kid? And I'm like, are you Jesus? He said, yes, I'm Jesus. I said, well, then you would know who I am. And he goes, well, you're Vladimir Prokhnevsky. And I just started crying like a little baby, because the reality of it sunk in, who I'm talking to. And I was just crying, and he was puzzled, looking at me like, wow, that's all it took, just me saying your name. I'm like, yeah, that's all it took. And but before I go into what he told me, I just want to describe how he looked. He was very, it's kind of described. So he was wearing this white robe, and it was fairly tightly fitted. It wasn't one of those like super loose. It was very tightly fitted and it had like a little sash or a little belt or something going across. I remember it was like a belt, but it wasn't where the belly button is. It was a little bit higher. I just remember thinking, it's like, oh, that's higher than where it should be. And his chest and his arms, you could tell that he was a fit man, like a carpenter, right? His hands were strong. Everything about him was strong. He wasn't like a weak person. And I looked at him. He looked a little older than he was because his skin seemed a little rough. He just looked like a man from a different century. He had this black, curly, thick hair with little hairs of gray hairs sticking out, and you could see them like a sore thumb. I mean, there were just a bunch of them sticking out on his beard. But one thing that kind of got my attention is that I remember his teeth weren't perfect. They were slightly, just a little bit crooked. I just remember just not a man that from this time period. I just remember thinking, like, this is not an American smile. this is somebody from like centuries ago. I just remember that's the first thing that got my attention, that his teeth weren't that perfect. And the way he smelled, it was I don't know, this material that he was wearing, it wasn't like the whitest white I've ever seen, how some people picture it to be. It was like normal material. It's the kind of, you can tell it was very heavy and very durable. It's the kind of material that in Ukraine, where we lived back home, we carried potatoes in. It was like a sack of potatoes. It's very durable. And he smelled this. There's a smell to him, to the clothing. It was like kind of like an old smell to it. It's kind of like, the way I would describe it, one time I was at Ohio State University Medical Center elevator, and I was in the elevator with a group of Amish people. And it had kind of this, their scent was kind of like similar to what Jesus smelled like. But anyway,
and just to kind of jump in here is to say, you're not getting the resurrected Jesus. You're getting Jesus of that time 2,000 years ago.
Right. Yes. And it kind of caught me by surprise a little bit, because I was.
But you have this strong carpenter who's been out in the sun working hard. More aged than if he were, a 30-something-year-old man today, let's say. So
harder life, I'm assuming, probably than what kids go through today.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I got out of it, is that this is a hard-working man, just like a strong man, somebody. And I remember just his arms were so strong. It wasn't weak, and he was very serious but loving at the same time. It's kind of hard to describe. I knew that he wasn't just my buddy. Kind of, I knew this is a king, a leader. And so then he got serious and lovingly. He said, "Vladimir, I have a message for you." And I was just like, "Oh, what's this message?" And he goes, like, "You and your wife, there's a great potential over your lives." And I remember thinking, oh, okay. Because during that time, me and my wife, we were kind of like back and forth. Just the relationship wasn't the best. It was pretty good, but we were arguing more than usual. And I just remember he was saying that what was so striking to me is that he was so concerned about my relationship with my wife. And he said, "You and your wife, there's great potential over your lives, but you guys have to work together as a team." And that was very interesting to me. And then second thing he said, and Trapper, this is kind of, I'm from another country. English is my third, fourth language, something like that. Public speaking or speaking in general is not something I was always afraid of. When I moved to the United States in 2000, I didn't speak a word of English, and I had kind of like this post-traumatic stress disorder from just going through school, not knowing the language. You almost felt like you were mentally challenged because you couldn't express yourself 100%, and so that scarred me for life. And I kind of became more of a shy person when it came down to public speaking. I tried to break out of it. Then I started, became a server, but it was still in the back of my
I would
heart.
say you've come along just fine.
Right. But anyway, but for some reason, when I started working at that church, and I just remember witnessing several miracles. Like I prayed for somebody, the guy started crying. He's like, it's just something's happening in me, and this and that, or just small miracles, little here and there. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, this God is real. There's power in Jesus' name. And I was like, well, how come nobody else knows of this power? So I thought, like, one day when I started this job at the church, I thought maybe I can start a podcast and call it God's Voice Today. So I thought, God's voice to me means, God said and there was, so kind of God's doing today in the lives today.
Similar to Touched by Heaven. We're talking about what God is doing today. Exactly right. Okay.
Right. So I got the domain name, and anyway, long story short, I got the equipment, but I never follow through. I just sat in my basement. But it's interesting, in that dream, he said, and by the way, Vladimir, that God's Voice Today thing you want to start doing, he goes, don't worry, I'll help you. I'm like, huh. And so Trapper, right next to him was a giant ladybug, huge ladybug. It's kind of like to his waist. And it almost threw off the whole dream for me because I looked at this ladybug, and but when I looked at this ladybug, it waved at me, and I felt this love, this unconditional love, just radiating from this ladybug. It was, I don't know. It's just like it's as if I knew who this was, but it was hard to describe the love that I felt. This unconditional. Anyway, so long story short, I think God has taken me through His own schooling, and maybe when I'm 60 years old, maybe there will be a such thing as God's voice.
Well, it's exactly what we do here. The other thing is, and I got little chills when you talked about the ladybug, because ladybugs are named after Our Lady. Yes, and here's why is that, and I'm trying to remember because I don't think I ever used it on a podcast, but I researched it for some reason. Maybe I was going to use it, or maybe, I don't know. But it has to do with, if you think about the spots on the back of a ladybug, and there's some correlation between that and Our Lady of Sorrows. It had to do with these Mary and what she wears and the robe. And there's one particular apparition where I think she had and that's kind of a reddish color, right? When I think of ladybugs, right? Kind of that reddish, and with the spots on it and everything. Anyway, that has a certain look to it, and that's how Mary looked in this one particular way. And so there was a correlation between Mary, and so when they would see these ladybugs, they were considered good luck and all kinds of things in many cultures, and so named after Our Lady, Mary.
No, and I agree, because the love that I felt, it was more like a feminine, it was more of a female kind of love towards you. So it was definitely, I can see that being, Mary, because it was like a motherly kind of love.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And what's great about it is, none of that. No correlation. You want to know Jesus, and there's Mary, again, cloaked in a way, in a symbolic way that when you research it, you just kind of go, oh, well, that makes sense. Mary was always with Jesus. She was the great teacher of the apostles. If they wanted to know something, I wonder how many of those stories that the apostles wrote, or that were relayed in the Gospels. How many times was it Luke going to Mary and saying, exactly, can you describe this Annunciation thing or the angel? I mean, you got to figure she's telling stories and also keeping herself out of the Bible. She had such humility that I think I get a little upset at her, because it's like, you realize everyone's talking about how you're not in the Bible. You can just hear her saying, nah, this is the book about, this is about Jesus. This is about my son. Leave me out of it. You can almost see her doing it because, that's just her humility, But,
and you know what else was interesting? I was I was making a big leap in my life. I was quitting a job that I loved to start a business. And on the last day, I invited some friends over to the cafeteria, and they were all around me. And I told some of my friends about this dream, not a lot of people. And then right as we were finishing up my last lunch at this work, the lady that was sitting next to me, my friend, she goes, "Vladimir, look at your sweater." And there's a ladybug on my shoulder. And I was just like, what? Anyway, so I took a picture of it. I still have a picture to prove it. But yeah, a lady, and that gave me so much peace, knowing that I will be okay. It's just like it's like that little message that they send from heaven, just like, Vladimir, don't worry, everything's gonna work out. Just trust us. That step. Take one step at a time. Don't zoom out and look at the whole thing. Just be faithful in that one step, and then eventually it's gonna paint a big picture, and it'll make all sense. It makes sense.
And a ladybug shows up.
And Ladybug shows up. Not only does it show up, but it shows up at the time when I needed a touch from heaven.
Yeah. Oh, she's watching over you. She's watching over you.
Yeah. Immediately when I woke up, I was like, God's gonna make me a podcast host, and I was so on fire, excited. And Trapper, I tried to record 1 or 2 interviews or something like that. By the way, it's harder than it seems.
No, you sent
You
me.
make it look so easy.
No, you sent me a link to an interview you did with a guy who had a near. By the way, I want to talk to the guy who had the near-death experience. If you're not using it, I'd love to connect with him. I really would. You did great. You could do this. You are so personable. You can do this, and you have your passions. Absolutely, you can do this.
I saw that you interviewed Howard Storm. I got to meet with. I reached out and read his book, watched his videos, and back 5 years ago when I lived in Columbus, I reached out to him, and he invited me to his lake house, and so I got to spend like the whole day with Howard Storm, and I remember all the questions. I just bugged him with so many questions. We went to some kind of local festival. He took us. It was like during this time of year, fall festival. There were like local bands and stuff, and so. Ever since then, I've been like fascinated with near-death experiences, and I was just looking through the near-death experiences, and I think that's how I found your podcast. Just a random search.
Do you have any experience you'd care to share with me as our first gathering here?
Experiences, I got to share this story with you. When I moved to the United States, I kind of strayed away from the Lord. I was an athlete. I played soccer here in the States, and we were climbing up the ladder to like college level kind of thing. And then I got hurt, and then I got into football kicking. I tried to walk on University of Tennessee to be a kicker. That didn't work out. But long story short, all that strayed me away even further because you run around with athletic crowd, you go into drinking, partying, all this stuff. It got to the point to where I got so depressed that I wasn't even leaving the house. My tooth cracked in half because I was so acidic, like the whole body. I started breaking out with acne on top of acne, and it was weird because I was scared to leave the house. Then I had to start sleeping with earplugs because I was so noise sensitive and fearful, and it was weird. Then I went up to Columbus, Ohio. My parents already moved up to Columbus, Ohio. There was a Russian church there, and my dad was on serving there, helping them. And when I went there to visit them, I went to their youth, and I just remember having so much fun. They didn't drink, they didn't smoke, but they had like campfires and volleyball, and it was just something about it. There's so much peace and love and joy, and it was contagious. I wanted more of that. I packed all my stuff, moved to Columbus, started seeking God like crazy, just changed 100% on that path. And then one time I was rooming with my older brother in the basement of this lady's house. And one time at night I was just sleeping, and I hear footsteps coming to me, and I'm like, oh, this is bizarre. Like, oh, it must be my brother going to the bathroom, because the bathroom was kind of like not far from where I was sleeping. So then I look up and I see this dark shadow just looking like a human being, but it's completely dark. And then the hands just go straight for my throat, start choking me. And I'm like, whoa, like, what's going on? And back then, Trapper, I was not a small kid. I was just, I was training to be a football player. So I was like 210 pounds, 6'2", and I tried to get this thing off of me, and I was swinging and swinging and swinging. I couldn't do anything. And my mom, she always told us that if you're ever in some kind of spiritual attack, just say in Jesus' name. And I was just kind of like, okay. And so I barely squeezed it out. I said, in Jesus' name, just barely. And that thing just went and went away. It was like at 3:00 in the morning. And that was bizarre. And I thought it was interesting that when I said in Jesus' name, that thing vanished. Yeah, he took a swipe at me, but this was kind of like a confirmation for me that God, there's so much power in Jesus' name, and that he is real, and that the demonic force, the dark side, scared of it. And in a way, it actually strengthened my faith. And after that, I just went full force with God. But that was like the bridge was sealed 100%. That I made that decision. That's it. I realized that God is powerful. He's my creator, and everyone's afraid. The darkness is afraid of him.
Oh yeah, afraid of us too. They're afraid of us. They really. That's
because greater is He that's in you than he that's in the world.
We're ruining their day. Believers ruin their day. They just, you add love to a planet where they just want chaos and hate. Could you actually feel the hands on your throat?
Oh my gosh, yes, and it was scary. I mean, it was one of those things that, regardless, it doesn't matter what it looked like, but I know one thing. What got my attention is that simple in Jesus' name, did scared it away. It like vanished. It just like vapored. Like then I just decided that what, I'm gonna go 100% to the light, and I'm gonna see God with all my heart, with all my soul,
And what does that mean for you now? What does that mean?
it's dying to self, trying to serve others, trying to just become more love. God is love, and I try to become. When you show love to people, you show God to people. When people experience love, they experience God, and once you experience that God's unconditional love, you will not walk away unchanged. And try to show generosity. You become more loving, and then you feel God more. The more you die to self and try to serve others, there's something happens that I can't explain.
Well, this has been awesome. You might hear yourself on a podcast. You just might, because you're just such a great story, Vladimir.
I'm rabbit trailing. I'm all over the place, but I just want to say thank you for what you do. This is, for me, this is definitely like a breath of fresh air. It's like that chicken noodle soups for the soul kind of thing, And I'm binging on it. I'm still not through all of the podcasts, but I was just working out. I hang out with you a lot when I work out. So when I'm on my runs, you're in my ear. So we hang out without you. You don't even know it, but we hang out.
Thanks, Vladimir. Like I said at the beginning, this was kind of skimming. We could probably do about 10 minutes on each one of these stories, but just skimming through all of this, of watching God's hand, all of it, of touching the Father first, Christianity, and then the heavenly gift of a vodka machine and turning mom around, and the goodness of mom. I mean, while facing all of that pressure, peer pressure of, oh, you're having too many kids, they're going to be murderers and thieves, and patting that tummy and going, no, they're all going to serve God. They're going to be successful and serve God, and they all are. To watch the courage, the fearlessness of Vladimir and his brother Sergei as they attack the world, and the joy, this sweet Christian joy that you hear in Vladimir's voice. Anyway, I just wanted you to hear kind of the whole thing here, a little different kind of episode of watching God's hand in all of it. All right, so what is your story? Get a hold of me at touchedbyheaven.net. My Patreon shout-out this week goes to Henry Evans. Thank you, Henry, for helping us out on a monthly basis. If these episodes are a blessing to you, if they fortify your faith, if they help you find your faith, if you want to help us on a monthly basis, patreon.com is the way to go. Or come here to episode 128 of touchedbyheaven.net and click your way through. Thank you so much for your help. And thanks for keeping us a 5-star podcast. You do that by your ratings and reviews in your podcast app. And to get more stories, more Touched by Heaven stories in the Touched by Heaven universe, sign up for our email. You can do that here at 128 of touchedbyheaven.net. Just click the Stay Informed link, okay? All right, and we'll see you next week here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.